The XY Advisor podcast is intended for professional financial advisors. All discussion is limited to publicly available information and should not be interpreted as legal, professional, or financial advice. XY Advisor does not hold an AFS license nor provide any financial services. Before making investment decisions, you should obtain financial advice from a qualified financial advisor.
Financial advisors help Australians live better lives, and we're great at it. But what about us? For us to thrive in the coming years, I'm here to ask a very big question. How can we live better, run better businesses, and help more clients along the way? My name is Jessica Brady, and I would love for you to join me as I listen and learn from experts who answer these very big questions. I am lucky enough to record most of my podcasts on Gadigal land.
Perpetual is a dynamic, active manager offering an extensive range of specialist investment capabilities, including Australian and global equities, credit, fixed income, multi-asset, as well as environmental, social and governance, designed to help meet the needs of clients across Australia and New Zealand. Underpinned by our long-standing and market-leading Australian equities capability, Perpetual also offers an extensive contemporary range of funds. As one of Australia's longest-serving and most trusted investment managers, our long-standing commitment is to deliver superior outcomes over the long term to clients.
Hello, welcome Nikki.
Hi Jess, how you going?
Good. I'm so excited to have you on today as our guest. Now, we've got lots to cover off in terms of you and your journey and the progression and what that's been like. But perhaps before I start, I won't say grilling. Grilling sounds a bit intense, but perhaps before we deep dive into that, I think it would be really great for everyone to get a bit more insight in terms of who you are and a bit more about your story and background.
Yeah, okay. Okay, how far back do you want me to go?
You can do whatever you like, my dear, so you can tell us whatever you want.
So I guess I'm originally from Toowoomba, which is a little bit outside of Brisbane. So grew up, born, bred Toowoomba girl. So two older brothers, mum, dad. Primary school, high school, all the way through. I moved to Brisbane as soon as I could. So after graduating high school, I had a gap year, which was effectively just so I could save up a bit of cash, move myself to Brisbane and go through uni. Thought when I went to uni I was going to work in accounting, actually. So that was the discipline that I chose. But in a part of that process, I did a finance course, and it was one of those lecturers who actually sort of switched my mindset there, and then I sort of majored in finance. So outside of that, so in the last year of my university degree, one of my tutors approached me and actually said, you're looking for a job inside the industry, and that's when I got put on to My Wealth Solutions. So I started working there in my last year of university and have been there since. So
interesting. And hey, when you went into accounting, did you go into it because you liked numbers and you really didn't know much else about the finance world and that just seems like the natural fit for you, or you always convinced accounting was for you and that's why you went to study it?
My brother's an accountant, so that was sort of like part of it. But I also did accounting at school, and I was pretty good at it. Numbers have always been my thing. I do not really like grammar, poetry, the arts. It's not the way that my brain is set, to be frank. So it was always going to be something. I really liked data analysis as well through university, but finance for me just sort of stuck in the respect that there's numbers, but people and sort of progression and outcomes, which I liked.
And had you heard of what financial planners were before you studied that class or that subject that got you into it?
No, not at all. I'd never really had any exposure to the industry. My family-wise was never high wealth individual. we always had, dad and mum put us through every extracurricular activity that we wanted to do. There was always that, food on the table, but outside of that, in terms of their financial planning, it was always self-directed. We never had that assistance, and I never had that exposure.
Yeah, which is interesting for us as a profession when we think through how our young people, particularly young women, are going to learn about this wonderful profession that we have if they don't know it exists. So we're very glad that you found that class and found your way into our world. Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to talk about with you is around being a paraplanner. So you were a paraplanner, obviously, for a little while before you stepped into the advice sphere. I want to talk about for you when you were a paraplanner, what it looked like you had to be a successful advisor. Did you have an idea of, okay, if I really want to make the transition for paraplanning to advice, I need to have X, Y, and Z as a personality style? Was there any sort of assumptions that you'd made around sort of that leap for you?
Yeah, I think the thought of that next step was incredibly daunting for me, and I think I can see it with even our team coming through. There's a couple of the more introverted people who are a little bit more reserved in the way that they hold themselves, and whether or not they feel as confident taking that next step. I don't. Certainly for myself, it was not something that I thought I was capable of in those early years of the industry. So even I remember back in the day going to the professional development days and being one of 3 women in the crowd. It wasn't necessarily that we were the predominant gender, nor were we the ones that were advisors even within that group. So it never really felt like the natural step for me to go from paraplanning to advising. I was pretty proficient, I like to think, in that paraplanning space, because I do have that attention to detail, and I really, really effectively structure everything that I do. It has to be correct, otherwise I will not send it out. It's just the way that I'm built. Whereas the persona for the advisors was always these big personalities that I didn't have.
So you're young, you're female, you're quieter, introverted. You look around you at these professional development days and you see people that frankly don't look, feel, or sound like you stylistically. And did that sort of in your mind then make you think, okay, I'm good at paraplanning, I like the numbers, I'm very technically proficient, this is where I stay? Or was there something in the back of your mind that was like, no, even though I don't look, feel, and sound a lot like these people, I'm going to push to the next level? How did that transition or thought process happen for you?
Yeah, so I guess in the back of my mind, I always had the goal of being the financial advisor. That was always the target, but then my own sort of self, I put sort of ceiling limits on what I thought I was capable of in those earlier years. So it took me a longer time, I would say, to get to that advice space compared to, someone with a more outward personality. I had a major sort of incident in my life that caused me to sort of wake up a little bit and just sort of question the fact of, I'm thinking that I want to do these things. I've studied to do these things. I've been working in this space, but I'm not biting the bullet and just having a crack at it. So it shifted my mindset completely to just jump in and have a go. And fortunately, from the moment I did that, it was basically, all bets are off. I was ready, and I was in a position to execute the work and onboard clients as I went through. So it took something drastic for me to sort of switch my mindset. And I think even over the time, like naturally now when I go to these professional development days, it's a completely different dynamic. It's a different makeup to what it was in the past. So I feel like we have progressed a little bit, but I still feel like there is this natural persona and this predominant sort of person who maybe is the typical image of an advisor.
If you hadn't had that drastic situation unfold that helped push you to be an advisor, do you think you would have got there but it would have taken a lot longer, or do you think that ceiling would have stayed for you?
Look, it's hard to know. I think that the ceiling possibly could have stuck. I don't know if I would necessarily be in the industry today if that was the case, because, that sort of paraplanning space, if you have this vision of something else, it can be quite repetitive. So I'm not sure I would have stayed in that role, and I possibly could have switched disciplines.
Interesting. Did the advisors that you worked with at the time know that your aspirations was to become an advisor, or was that something that you kept quite private?
No, they knew. Yeah, they definitely knew. And they were pushing me to take that next step and effectively, try my hand at it instead of just saying that I wanted to, but not putting those wheels in motion.
There's some beautiful, sad research that shows that through a gendered lens, obviously I'm being very generic here, but often men will look at sort of what skills it takes to do a role, and they might have quite a few of them, but not all of them, and think, yeah, cool, I can do most of that. I've got this, and I'll bite it off and figure out the rest of the stuff that I don't know later. But often women want to have all of the skills and all of the requirements that's on a role before they feel competent or confident enough to say, yeah, cool, I can do every one of those. Does that resonate with you in terms of that situation from paraplanner to advisor?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it nails it on the head.
And so for people who run businesses, it's something to think about, because sometimes we put must know or must have, and so we're actually locking out a lot of the workforce where people that are applying for it anyway possibly don't have all of those skills. And so it's an interesting thought-provoking point around when you are looking for talent, how you word your application so that you're appealing to the widest, most diverse pool to get the best candidates. Otherwise, there's a natural filtration system that's happening anyway, and you're losing quality candidates before they've even gotten to you, and they probably happen to be women by the sounds of it.
Or even identifying that talent and that sort of personality trait and sort of developing that the processes around that person to encourage them to take those next steps. So identifying what it is that they need in terms of, their confidence level to actually get them to where that they are capable of being.
Absolutely. And that's easier when they're in the business, because you've proven yourself, and you've proven your competency and your trustworthiness and your value alignment to the business. And so if you find a good paraplanner, you hold on to them for dear life and hope that they never leave. But also acknowledge that a lot of them do have aspirations. But the point that you made before is a really interesting one around that you perhaps wouldn't have stayed in the industry or the profession if that next opportunity for you hadn't become available. That's very thought-provoking. So how did it happen? How did the transition from so the life-changing event happened, you had the aha moment that said, Nikki, you got to do this, babe. You're qualified, you're competent, you got this, let's go. Tell me, and the advisors obviously around you supported you. How did you then transition? Did you take over a book of existing people? What happened from there?
Yeah, I started from scratch. So My Wealth Solutions as a whole has got a marketing division within it, and we have a fairly strong internet lead presence. So we get quite a number of leads from SEO, Google, et cetera, So everything that I have built has been from an organic process. I haven't purchased a book of business or taken over any of the existing advisors' clients.
And as someone who considers themselves more reserved and more introverted, tell me about what it was like in those first few sort of interactions. Yeah. How did it go, and what knowledge can you impart to people that are perhaps going to be on this journey in the future?
Yeah, so I don't like to fail. I don't think anyone necessarily does, but I do think some people are more in tune with it and probably more accepting of that sort of outcome. For me, it is a pretty big deterrent to to not achieve what I set out to achieve. So it was a matter of preparation. So I had, so the existing advisors, Ben and Guy, had given me their framework. They're very, the frameworks and scripts that they used to develop way back in the day. So I sort of extended beyond them. I created my own and much more elaborate outline of what I want that meeting to follow, the gist of it, how the pattern will happen, and then the conversations around certain sort of moments that could pop up. If this situation arises, these are my go-to sort of conversation pieces that I could rely upon, or the tools that I could use to help encourage that client conversation or understanding. So I was very prepared, and I know sometimes that can be a disadvantage. You could be thrown off trail and not know how to get back onto the conversation. So that was a fairly real risk, but I was fortunate enough to the people I was in front of were quite casual and adaptable for me, and basically let me control the meeting, which is what I needed in those first conversations. From there, everything sort of developed out where I don't have to follow a set format. If I'm sitting in front of someone who is very direct and has to control the meeting, I can sort of move with that person as opposed to having to be the lead. So that just took time and practice.
And so these scripts helped you build sort of a framework and some psychological safety so that you felt that no matter what was thrown at you, you'd come prepared, you'd thought about what to do. No doubt situations would have arisen that had gone outside of that sort of script and skill set. But as you said, you sort of built your confidence because the first few, thankfully, sound like they were easy ones, or people that were quite happy to sort of follow the bubble or the ball, I should say. And so do you think it worked when you look back at those scripts and how it went? If you were going to do it again, would you follow a similar methodology?
Yes. Yep, I would. I mean, even in my meetings today, I have like a set sort of agenda that is just my now mental checklist that I follow in meetings, and it very much is reflective of those first sort of pieces that we put together. The other thing that we would do is I'd sit down with either Guy or Ben with the snapshot, so the client sort of bird's eye view of a scenario and what their sort of general goals were, and we would basically workshop the meeting before I went into that meeting. So it would give me a little bit of an outline of, they might throw a few little sticky questions at me and see how I react, and that was extremely helpful.
And so you had that real-time feedback loop because someone was there sort of helping you understand what tricky things and curly questions might come up and how you're going to approach them. And so how long have you been giving advice for now?
It would be 5 years. So in the industry since 2013, but formally in front of clients for 5 years.
And so what do you say to an advisor who's got an amazing paraplanner, but the paraplanner is a little bit reserved, not as sort of outspoken as they are, but very competent, very technical, and has ambitions to become an advisor? What would you say to that advisor or the practice owner who thinks that perhaps you need to have more of an extroverted, outgoing personality style to be successful in an advice landscape?
I would say I disagree with that sort of thought process. I think you should harness, cradle that person and their skill set to get them to where they want to go, because I would be pretty confident that if they're demonstrating those skills in the back office, the admin, the paraplanning space, that would certainly carry through, and they would be able to nurture those client relationships quite well, both in new business or retaining existing business.
I mean, obviously I baited you. I knew you were going to say that. But I think that there's method to my madness, Nikki, because you and I spoke about this a little while ago, and there really is sort of an archetype of what an advisor is. And I think it turns a lot of people who aren't naturally like that, it either does two things to me. It either makes them look at that and think, well, that's not me, therefore I can't do this. That's not the thing for me. Or they have to then put on that persona, which is not them, and it's not authentic, and it never works from a long-term sustainability perspective because you're not being authentically you. And I say full disclosure, I'm quite a loud, extroverted, confident person. And so I'm probably on the other end of the spectrum, but I want to hold space for saying that there shouldn't just be one way and one type of way. And I'm a very passionate ambassador for diversity. And I don't think we've talked about this sort of diversity enough.
Yeah. I think there's the initial challenge of getting these type of people into these roles within the industry. But from a client's point of view, if you've tracked the financial services industry over the last decade plus, and you feel like they have an image of what the advisor is, and if you walk into that meeting and you're completely different to this boisterous individual that they've got in the back of their mind, and you're genuine to who you are, and you can legitimately help their financial situation, they're going to be comfortable with that, and they would see through any sort of false your advertisement of yourself straight away.
Totally. And just thinking about it, like I think what we've done in the past is said, okay, the people that are not as extroverted possibly are better at technical components of advice and not as good at the face-to-face ongoing relationship components of advice. And so we've sort of pigeonholed people, if they do become advisors, to be more of the technical, almost non-client facing roles. Which again, I would imagine you sort of disagree that is their capability.
I think those people can really understand exactly what, not only is their compliance probably going to be good, which is, happy days, that's part of the process, but they will be able to understand that client and then carry them through not the SOA implementation or, those questions a long time or the review process. They will understand and execute exactly what the client needs. So I think that feedback loop between advisor and client would be actually, given their personality, it would be quite effective. Their issue or my issue tends to be getting bogged down and in control of that process sometimes, wanting to be on every part of that time management wise. It's just not possible. I need to have that team around me that I can rely on and be confident in their execution process. That's probably one of the major drawbacks of having that personality is, you want to be on top of everything.
Let's talk about that for a minute. So you were a highly successful paraplanner. You transitioned to a brave new world, which is advice. How did you then work with your paraplanner? Because that would have been a really hard process to let go.
Yeah. Yeah, it was super hard, and I'm pretty anal about certain things. I just am. It's just who I am. So, fortunately, don't get me wrong, I have butted heads a couple of times with different paraplanners with me wanting things done a particular way, whereas, the other advisors who are happy for the technical people to do the technical work and then they take the work and communicate it, that they can let that go. I'm less inclined to be able to let that go. But fortunately, if we get two technical minds together, generally we can make a little bit of a plan of attack about how we're going to handle that.
And so do you have a paraplanner that works exclusively with you? Do you have paraplanning in-house? What does that look like for you right now?
Yeah. So we have, it's changed over the years. At the current state of it is that we have associate advisors who run our paraplanning, and we also have outsourced paraplanning who work hand in hand with those guys.
And so the checking process for you, or the feedback loop for you, how have you embedded that in your framework or your process now?
Yep. So everything from an advice direction comes out immediately after the meeting, and then it's picked up by the associate, drafted for the external power planners, and then it comes back. It goes through the associate advisor before it lands with myself, and then it's vetted from my point of view before it goes to presentation. So there's quite a few points across the process.
Yeah. And presumably that trust level needed to be built over time so that you could feel really confident handing things to the associate, because they seem to be the linchpin to make sure that the external power planner gets it done in the way that you're looking for, to ensure that there's no rework or confusion with what exactly you're wanting.
Yeah. It takes some time onboarding new people, getting them in your process. It naturally does take some time, and sometimes you will inevitably have a little bit of a delay in some of the advice production. It's just part and parcel with the process, but they're all growing pains. If we're going to want to expand, we're going to need that support in order to keep the business tracking the way that we want it to track.
Interesting. I can imagine for someone that really does value that level of control, not in a bad way, in a good way. I feel like we've got negative connotations to the word control. It would be really hard. It would be really hard to let go and understand that commercially this isn't the right way for you to spend your time and energy, but still have the focus and the rigor that you need to have good quality advice documents. It's a fascinating, complicated battle.
Yeah. You do have to, I think, work as a part of a team, which means, that if I see an email that goes out that's not perfectly positioned in the way that I would have done it, if it still gets what I need to the client, that's what we need to happen.
Well done you for letting go on what you can and need to.
It's been a long process, trust me.
So I want to talk about you making partner.
Okay.
You made partner, which is really exciting. So first, huge congrats.
Thank you. It's it was a pretty big step.
It's a massive step. Can we talk about the journey to partner and, what were the milestones that you were working towards, or did you have a really methodical plan with the other partners? How did the sort of partner process work for you? And obviously tell me to go away if this is too sort of, I'm nosy. So I ask all the things and you just push back on the things that you don't want to talk about. But, I'm fascinated to understand partnership processes in every business. And I want to know whether there was a really clear roadmap for you to make partner. Was it something that you had to push a lot to become partner, or is it something that was presented to you in terms of this is where we think you could go and this is how you can get there?
Okay. Well, so the partner process that we've gone through is probably, well, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's probably the traditional sort of setup. So essentially what's happened is I had a portion of very, very small portion of ownership inside of My Wealth Solutions over the years. Yeah, it was paid as like a loyalty bonus scheme, but that company itself is quite large at this point. So for me to buy into that, not only would that sort of pool of partners become 3, which wasn't something that the primary directors Ben and Guy were too keen to do, but the percentage ownership would be quite small. So I wouldn't have had too much control in the direction that I wanted to take. So instead, my clients have effectively been split out into My Wealth Solutions 2, and Guy and Ben own 25% each, and I own 50% of that entity. So that is how it's positioned for the moment. That was an idea that was presented to me from Guy and Ben. So it wasn't necessarily always a part of my dream to have and run my own business, but it's something that sort of developed as time has gone on, because naturally as an employed financial advisor, there's a ceiling limit to what I could have offered My Wealth Solutions. And that sort of direction of what I wanted to do was also, not as tailored to my end outcome as I probably would have liked. So now with this shift, I can control, one, how I grow my own team, but two, what I do personally over time with my education pathways or the niche that I want to specialize in over time.
Interesting. Can we talk a little bit about the first business, not number 2, which is the one that you've got sort of the majority equity in? So you were given a teeny tiny portion of equity, may not be teeny tiny, but just from what you're saying, I think it might be, of equity as an employee, as a loyalty reward. Did that happen when you were an advisor? Did that happen when you were a paraplanner? I think it's always interesting around retention of staff and what people are offering to keep quality talent.
Yeah, it happened. So I was originally hired at My Wealth Solutions as a paraplanner. So like on my first day, Ben literally gave me, I'd never seen an SOA in my life. He gave me an SOA and he said, here's a new client situation. This is the strategies. See what you can do. So that was my introduction to advice. But it's and then what happened is the original, like the CSO had left, so I got moved into that role, and the boys assumed that paraplanning back in their workload. So from there, that when the business built out, that's when I moved back into paraplanning before going to associate, before going to advisor. So the bonus itself, the retention bonus, the equity portion was paid initially when I was a client service officer, I believe, if I'm correct. And then second installment from there when I possibly was an associate. But it was all time-related, performance-related loyalty ESP, employee shares program.
And you can tell me to go away, but did it make you feel more wedded to the company because you were part owner?
I think it probably could have if it was more like it had a bit more reach about it, or possibly, the bit more significance around the numbers or what it meant. It was pretty nice to know that they wanted me to be a part of the business, and that's why that was on offer. That was certainly was very happy with that, but it would have been nice to see like a longer vision from what that meant. But it just, that pathway never crystallized, and they presented this other pathway, which was the ownership, but, separation as well.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I just think it's interesting to understand, from the perspective of the receiver, what did you feel? How did you think about it? Did it mean that, you were and everyone's different, right? But were you therefore, really invested long term in them as a company? And, listening to you, it sounds like if you are going to do that for staff, really understanding, that they know what it means and that they then feel really empowered to be on the journey of making sure the business is successful, but also them understanding, well, what does this actually mean for me over the long term, and what is that progression pathway? I think for a long time we've locked equity out of people that aren't revenue producers or advisors. And so it's really interesting to hear that that was something that was presented to you much earlier than that in your journey.
Yeah. No, it was, I was extremely grateful to get offered that in the role that I was in, and on the timeline that I was. I think it was just that vision and that sort of clarity around what that vision was that was the missing piece.
And so now we have this sort of number 2 version, which you sort of have the majority control over. What have been the learnings or the surprises for you now that effectively you are sort of the business owner there? Are there things that you are like, oh my gosh, if I'd have known about X, Y, or Z before this, I would have done X, Y, or Z?
If I had have known what I known today, I would have pushed for this a lot earlier. Knowing that this was an option, then I would have been keen to pursue it as soon as I possibly could. One of the biggest surprises has been probably that HR element is not hiring my own staff and then running their workflow and managing that alongside of them, that has been quite time consuming and probably wasn't something I inbuilt into my expectation when I was thinking about going this path. So I'm still wanting to keep my full advisor load because I'm still building my client base, but then this tagged on, which has just meant that the time committed to this process has been a lot higher than I expected. But I should have expected that. I just don't know why I didn't at the time.
I mean, we all,
staff and HR, that sort of part of the business is always going to take your concentration. And I probably didn't heed that advice as much as I should have.
But you never really know. My analogy for this is it's like having a baby, I think, because I haven't got one. But I think it's like, you know that babies in the beginning don't sleep and they require a lot of attention and, you know. But you don't really know until you have one what it's really, really going to be like. And I think anyone that manages staff or anyone that has a business is probably sitting in their car or wherever they're listening to this going, yes, with what she's saying. So how do you manage that? This is really tricky, and I've been there too. How many staff do you have? Are you likely to bring on more staff in the next little while? And whilst you're building your business, being the face and managing quite a lot of the other things and trying to have some form of life, how does this work as someone, and I'm selfishly asking this because I'm still trying to find the answer, as someone who is quite organised, perhaps you've cracked the code. How do you do this, Nikki?
So we have 3 in my team, so 3 plus myself plus an external outsourcer, so 5 as a group. We are currently looking to hire a new CSO to come on board, which will allow one of my existing team members to progress in her pathway, and then so to one of the guys who's just passed his CER exam. He's going through his professional year and he will be able to see some clients in the following quarter. So that's the plan. Now, in terms of, we have a calendar block or in our every week where we have a set allocation for an hour meeting each staff member, and that is to go through their workflow. Everything is tracked through various pipelines so that we can bring up summary sheets and we can go through exactly, where's this client's implementation at, where's this client's review at, or where's this SOA prep at. So that is how we manage it. It's set in stone in the calendar. No clients can book over it, and it's a place for burning questions. Every month it is intended for us to have a bit of a bigger conversation around what are the roadblocks that they're encountering, what is the next step for their progression plan. Is there any issues that they're sort of facing that we can help with, just to try and keep the communication open and resolve any issues or know where their head's at.
And so it sounds like there's sort of 2 parts to this. There's the everyday operational running. Where's the workload at? What's holding you back? What's happening from an operational perspective? And then there is a different, quite distinct meeting that is progression for you as a person. Where are you at? Where are you moving to? How do we make sure you're supported along the way? Is that right?
Yeah, yes, that's the goal. I will admit that, that we have our set in stone 6 monthly career planning session and then a formal review, so that will happen. That sort of one-on-one extended time it sort of falls out naturally in our catch-ups. But the goal would be to have a bit more of an in-depth conversation about how they're feeling about the role of business in general and make sure that they're still happy, because that staff process, hiring and developing is 1, expensive and 2, time consuming.
And so hard.
Yeah.
So hard. Yes. And getting it wrong is so hard and heartbreaking for everyone involved. No one enjoys any of that as well. I can imagine you feel the same.
Yeah, exactly.
And so would it be fair to say it's about 1 day a week that you would spend on the business between all of the staff meetings and perhaps some other business style stuff that you would do, and then maybe the other time is client facing, or what does that sort of mix look like for you?
So I would say all the business stuff in terms of the numbers, because we've had quite a big changeover process from the revenue being directed to My Wealth 1 to My Wealth 2, which is still, ongoing at the moment. But that all of that is really hitting after hours, weekend time. The week itself is for new business, existing business, or just random ad hoc follow-ups, emails, the typical sort of stuff, but half-day allocation purely for internal HR.
Cool. Are you having any work-life? Is it work-life balance? Is it work-life balance? Any tips for anyone that's doing this? Because I burnt myself out demonstrably trying to do this and fit everything in. Have you managed to find a system or a process or a way that works for you, or are you just happy to acknowledge this is the tricky point and I'm just going to keep soldiering on, which is what I did, and take it from there? I'm a worker. I've always been a worker. If I've got a random day off that doesn't seem to, have anything happening, I will be just checking on emails and doing a few bits and bobs, because that's the way that I am built. It doesn't really, I'm sure it stresses my husband out, but more so than it does me. I'm sort of built this way. I am an advocate for, if you need a day, take a day. Like it's sometimes everyone will hit that cap, and if you just tap out for that 24 hours, I'm a pretty strong believer that you can sort of come back and be ready to go the next day. I haven't cracked any sort of code. I believe that this is the part where you put in to get established so that you can get a bit more of that lifestyle balance back. But I inevitably would never see myself in a position where, the majority of my time isn't taken up by work, because it is what I love doing. Yeah, awesome. Any other, before we get into, I could ask you lots of, I already have asked you lots of questions. Any other pieces of advice you would give? I want to talk specifically to the people that have aspirations to be advisors but are scared about the journey, or who have aspirations to go and present perhaps an equity model to business owners that, that when they're ready to step up to take that next level. Like, do you have anything else that we haven't covered today that you would say to them? I
would just say that, one of my probably biggest regrets is not stepping up sooner, and not sort of having those conversations with the directors in a constructive manner. It was always in, something's gone wrong, or I'm feeling unhappy, and then it was, those conversations weren't constructive because they were after the issues had sort of been around for a while. So I think approaching them to get a feel for what their vision is for the business, and then seeing how you work into that vision, is pretty important, because if they don't have that professional development in mind, if they don't want to grow the business and you want to be an advisor, maybe it's not the right fit. Whereas if, you can align your two goals and objectives, then that they're going to be open to it. So if you put the numbers behind them and you put the work to them, they should be open to those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about not wasting your time and feeling dispirited along the way, right?
Yeah. Things do take time. I think, that's the other side of things. You have to be a little bit patient. You have to be able to commit to the work and demonstrate that you're capable of doing it. So it's got to go both ways.
Because equity is like marriage. Like, you need to date first, right? I think. And I see this a little bit, like we've had people come to us for advisor roles and they've been really short on their time frame around equity. And we're like, whoa, we didn't even know you yet. You didn't even know us yet. We got to date first before we decide whether this is good for everyone. Otherwise, that can be really dangerous.
Yeah. I think it's a big... it's a big decision to introduce someone into your business. It's effectively like another baby. So you're welcoming them into that family, and that all of the legal, financial stuff that's going to come with it, you've got to be pretty comfortable together. So give it time.
Give it time. Us millennials, we don't like hearing that, but it is important. I've loved chatting to you today. Thank you so much for – I sort of bullied is a strong word with negative connotations, but possibly the right word. Sort of bullied Nikki into being on the podcast because I had heard amazing things about her, and I wanted to hold space for having this really important conversation. So before we get into rapid fire questions, I want to say a massive thank you. And how can people learn more about you and your business if they want to find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. Would probably be the easiest path to go.
Yep.
Otherwise, I mean, the My Wealth Solutions office number is on the website, along with the information around, the services that we do, the team, if it's in alignment with your vision. Then just get in touch with the team. That they'll give you my email address, and then we can take it from there.
Wonderful. Okay, let's round out today's chat with some rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
What is one thing that you do to look after your mental health?
Go to the gym, so exercise.
And is that often?
The goal is 3 to 4 times per week, but winter, 3 times.
3 times is good.
Yep.
We've already covered this a little bit, I think, but I'm just going to ask you, just in case it's a different answer to what we've talked about. What is a piece of advice that you would give to younger Nikki?
I would say be a little bit more confident in yourself and your capability, and approach conversations, those meaningful conversations about where you want to go earlier, and be a bit more constructive around how you're broaching those subjects.
Amazing. Do you have something that's on your bucket list that you haven't ticked off yet?
I really want to spend at least a month in Italy and just go around. My husband's Italian. We love everything to do with Italian food, wine, the culture. So that's up there for sure.
I think if you have an Italian husband, it's compulsory that you do that.
I agree.
Last question. Do you have a book for me to read as part of my fake book club?
Oh, I have a couple. My probably favourite book is The Brain That Changes Itself. It's by Norman Deutsch, but it's about what the human brain is capable of. So it's something the topic that I got pretty interested in years ago. And the book itself was, I really enjoyed that book.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Thank you so much. Nikki, I've loved chatting with you today. Thank you so much for being the podcast guest for this week.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you so much for having me.